Okay, I'm live. I have sent out the invite and I'm just going to check on the other platforms here, see how the old live stream's working there this morning. Checking on Rumble. If you folks are on Rumble, really appreciate the subscribers on Rumble. Starting to get more views on Rumble than I am on YouTube these days. All right, looks like everything is working over on Odyssey, I do believe. Well, at least it seemed like it was. Just in there, folks. Just give me a second. Okay, yeah, we're good now. It's working. Everything seems to be good to go on Odyssey. And I do believe Mark is getting ready to join us. So just give me one sec, folks. Here, I'll bring him into the chat. Hello, Mark. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and it's an honor to meet you, Bennett. Thank you so much for having me on. Thanks for the interest in the project.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Actually, it's something I've been thinking about myself, actually, and it was nice to find out through some mutual connections. I believe a couple of gentlemen from the Free State Project kind of let me know about this endeavor here, this initiative that you've undertaken in New Brunswick. And I got to tell you, it definitely piqued my interest because it's something I'm very much concerned about. And I do also recognize the fact that culture is the biggest driver. As and you folks, even I remember watching your the live stream or the interview that you did with Just Right Media, and you both brought up actually the fact about something Andrew Breitbart said, where politics is downstream of culture, and I just can't help but try to emphasize that to so many people. Is this just vote harder? It's just not going to work in this current political environment anyways. But anyways, before we get too much in the weeds, if you wouldn't mind, Mark, the first question I had for you was, where you're in New Brunswick now. I'm just curious, where were you living prior to New Brunswick?
Well, I used to live in Ontario. I was heavily involved in the Caledonia crisis.
Right.
And I essentially gave up my career as a real estate broker to become a rule of law activist. We were trying to get the Ontario Provincial Police to enforce the law because some violent Native militants, actually a small minority, had taken over a subdivision under construction and were terrorizing the town while the police watched. And I'm ex-military. I swore an oath to defend my country, and the police were arresting Canadians who were protesting the OPP's failure to enforce the law. And they actually arrested a resident for trying to put up a Canadian flag for Remembrance Day. And I said, there's no bloody way I'm going to sit by and watch that. So that kicked off a many-year struggle against the OPP, the Ontario government, violent natives, the media, and what would be, I would say, the forerunner in Canada of Antifa, the Black Bloc, who were supporting the violence. We ended up, to make a very long story short, we fought them to a standstill using Martin Luther King Jr.'s methods, and it was very effective. Our team, the work that we did led to a Supreme Court of Canada decision, a 9-0 decision in our favor. Actually, it was our teammate, Randy Fleming. You can look it up. It's called Fleming v. Ontario, 2019. It was just in time for the COVID stuff. And unfortunately, I couldn't find one lawyer in New Brunswick to take that court case into a courtroom. And essentially what the court said, and slapped down the OPP and the Ontario government, who were both arguing that because it was a land claim emergency, they were entitled to violate the charter rights and actually arrest innocent people rather than the people threatening them. So it was right on point for COVID. And then I conceived this, then we moved to New Brunswick and we ran up huge bills, ran through our lines of credit, ran through our savings, pensions, and we said, okay, let's sell out. We went to New Brunswick. We were planning on just I wanted to buy a motorcycle with a sidecar. I've always wanted to tour Atlantic Canada on a bike and fix up one last house and live quietly there ever after.
Right.
And then, of course, our rights were taken. And it was shortly after that I realized 15 days to flatten the curve was a lie. They started pushing these untested, rushed experimental vaccines on pregnant women. And of course, I don't know about you, but I'm old enough to remember why pregnant women don't take drugs because of thalidomide. And that was a huge red flag for me. Wrote a report to the New Brunswick government, laid it all out. It's on the website. You can see it at nbfree.ca in the download section. Not one MLA was interested. And we were, of course, stripped of our rights. All of our rights, as most people were who refused to take this drug. And I was still prepared to fight because I am a fighter, and I was arrested 5 times in Caledonia. I'm in 2 books. This was a bestseller by Christy Blatchford. This one here, it was basically our story, Victory in the No-Go Zone. So I'm not afraid of a fight. But when Justin Trudeau announced he was going to lock us in the country, that really concerned me. I did a lot of work with Jewish people. I have a website called IsraelTruthWeek.org. I used to go into synagogues, Jewish schools, and churches and lecture about Israel's forgotten land rights. So I'm very familiar with modern Jewish history. I've been to Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, and I've been on a tour of Israel with the Jewish National Fund, which is their large infrastructure organization in Israel. Basically, anything big that gets built there is done by these people. So I was very, very familiar with how fast a society could go off the rails. So I actually we left Canada. We had made the very difficult decision that we had to get out of Canada. And so right now I'm talking to you from Ecuador, Cuenca, Ecuador. But the project is growing, and I have a moving coordinator that's based in St. Stephen area. And I have another fellow, we're working on creating a not-for-profit. So I just wanted to be clear. I'm not actually in New Brunswick, but I'm still fighting for New Brunswick. So sorry, a little bit long-winded there, but I wanted to be right up front with you.
No, that's excellent. That is really excellent. And I'm glad that the one thing I will say in response to now, I'm glad that you won your fight at Caledonia stuff, but and I'm glad you brought up the whole COVID thing in New Brunswick. And because what the last 3 years played out for me. Now, I had my own injustice, and that was actually one of the things I've noticed. A lot of people who have suffered their own personal injustices are the ones that are have the notions or the fortitude to at least try to find some information about your rights and freedoms. Because as with most Canadians, we grew up and or taught things, as it pertains to the Canadian, the Charter of Rights and the freedoms and how that's all laid out and spelled out for us. And all these things sound good in theory. And, unless you've ever had to test those theories, I guess it's right. It's quite an easy sell, right? The problem is with most people, I'm sure you experienced this, and I certainly have, is the minute you are up against, the system in all its, not so glory, I guess, but you kind of get the full-faced realization that these words or any kind of rhetoric, anything written on parchment paper or a computer screen really doesn't hold up to scrutiny. And it doesn't really, sorry, go ahead.
No. You are bang on. And sometimes I'll have people talk about how it's the Second Amendment in the U.S. that guarantees freedom, and guns guarantee freedom. And look, I'm a big believer in self-defense rights, and I have thoughts on that. If we have time, we can talk about that. But I'll tell you something. The thing that guarantees freedom is a culture of freedom. In other words, a bunch of people living together who share the same values, who teach their kids about the things that you and I probably learned in school, and I'm pretty sure you're old enough to remember reading 1984, reading Animal Farm, understanding individual rights versus collective rights. Mm-hmm. And those are the thing. So we're going back to the culture thing again. Yeah. That's what ultimately guarantees freedom. Now, listen, I've been to jail 5 times. Never convicted of anything in Caledonia. They were arresting us for walking down a public road, believe it or not, and trying to put up Canadian flags. Our leader was arrested 11 times. We used to line up on the road they wanted to arrest us for trespassing on a public road, which just happened to go through this occupation center. We would line up and say, okay, arrest us. We'd have 11 of us arrested at the same time. And all of that was to defend the Charter of Rights because we believed in it. And the court still believed in it. And the politicians more or less believed in it. It's just that some people in positions of power forgot about it. And we used Martin Luther King Jr.'s method so effectively that the radical left held a conference in Caledonia, and in which one of the sessions was, how do we counter these guys' use of Martin Luther King Jr.'s methods and words, because us, are making them look like the racists.
Right.
Hello. That's how effective it was. I started trying to teach that to people in New Brunswick, and I've realized since then that the charter now is probably more worthless than a piece of toilet paper, because at least toilet paper you can dry out and use again. And I don't say that lightly. I paid. Look, I'm almost embarrassed to tell you about the price, because my wife's sitting, right beside me, and she knows what we live through financially and the price we paid, and it bothers her, it embarrasses her. But I'm going to be honest with you. We paid a huge price because we believe that race-based policing was so evil in Ontario that we were willing to pay any price to end it. And I have to say honestly to people, I don't see any national political or legal solution here. In Canada today, first of all, the legal solution, I told people right from the beginning, the charter was not going to protect you. It was going to take probably 10 years to get into court. We took 13. And even by the time you win it, after paying $100,000 or more in legal fees, all the damage is going to be done by then. So the charter is not going to save you, because the only remedy under charter is a civil lawsuit. The only thing that had a hope of saving us was criminal prosecutions. Now in Caledonia, I'll tell you what the police and the government was really scared of. And I'm being generous when I say we, our leader became an expert in using the private prosecution provisions of the Canadian Criminal Code, and he made legal history. His case is on the federal government website, listed on the federal government website. I think it's McHale VR or something, okay? We got 2 OPP commissioners criminally charged, 2 frontline officers criminally charged, 2 native ringleaders charged, while the OPP refused to charge them. Let me tell you, the police don't like that. Now, there are some loopholes. Now, I am not Gary McHale, who led our fight and did the legal work. He was just one particular kind of jailhouse lawyer who was an absolute genius. That's not me. I'm not going to be able to, I couldn't do that. So I tried to hire a criminal lawyer. I paid him $500 retainer, never even got to meet him. I met all of his conditions for trying. My goal was, I wrote this report, which I urge everybody to read, and I talked about the criminal code. I mean, everything that was doing. Do you know that what Premier Higgs did in New Brunswick when he said, we're going to find ways to make people want to be vaccinated, in my opinion, is a criminal code offense of intimidation. And it made me literally sick to my stomach when I read that. You go read the case law. It's crystal clear that you cannot use your authority to force anybody to consent to unwanted touching. And the moment you do that, if they actually acquiesce to you, that's actually definition of assault, and it's right in the criminal code. So my vision was, let's find a criminal lawyer in New Brunswick somewhere who can help us take some representative cases, number one, to the RCMP, who probably would have done nothing, but then go to the private prosecution right in front of a judge. Maybe they wouldn't have done anything. But I'm telling you, the guy took my money and did nothing else. I got an ethics expert who used to serve on the Ontario College of Physicians and Surgeons on the ethics review board. He was willing to be a consultant. I lined up 2 of the greatest civil rights activists in New Brunswick, Ken and Bonnie Gilliard, who were ready to help as well. And so I met all of his conditions. So it wasn't for a lack of trying. We reached a point in Ontario, in New Brunswick, and this is the scary thing. Bennett, that I still tell people. The freedom people in New Brunswick, the ones who refuse to vax, are in a very precarious position right now
Yeah.
because nothing's really changed.
No.
At the stroke of a pen,
Yeah.
Premier Higgs could order your door kicked in and you forced vaxxed or taken to a camp, and even if he wanted to, he could order you shot. And there is no lawful way in New Brunswick to stop it. Because if you can't get a lawyer, how do you stop it legally? Well, somebody will say, well, yeah, well, I'll fight. Okay, I said legally. How do you do that?
Right. Right.
And this is the thing that people have to understand. And the good part of that is we all discovered how much power a province has. And that's the genius of what the New Hampshire Free State Project did. They recognized that the state has near sovereign powers, as do our provinces. And
Right.
for us to take back our freedom, never mind taking it back. I don't want to just take it back. I want to expand it. I want to defend it. I want to make sure this never happens again. And I want to do it peacefully. And I want to give hope to people that we can do it peacefully. There are three things we have to control: policing, healthcare, and education. You control those three things, this never happens again. And freedom is guaranteed for your kids forever.
Yeah.
And
Well, actually, let me just say, Mark, actually, because you're right to a degree, but I think first and foremost, and this is something like it's taken me, going on 12 years to get all these things figured out. To me, when I look at trying to figure out things from philosophical principles like ethics, and even delving into metaphysics or physics or epistemology, or just what are these principles, these concepts, these first principles. Once I started figuring all this out, what it comes down to me is imagine a big jigsaw puzzle. And what it really comes down to is most people have a few pieces that they've picked up over the course of their life. So they can get hyper focused on that, but they don't actually see the big picture. And to me, the big picture, and it took me a while to learn this, but once again, the people that take the time and put in the efforts to learn these things, the best thing that we can do is help educate and inform and enlighten the mind. Because really, to me, liberty begins as a state of mind. Everything else is secondary if people don't actually understand, first and foremost, what does it mean to be a free human being, and where do those rights and freedoms come from? Because what I see today, and even when you're talking about the legal system, is people fall back or rely on the authority of people who are in positions of government or the lawyers or the prosecutors as the final arbiters or authority to determine that. And I would say that's the wrong people to rely on, right? But anyways, what are your thoughts?
Oh, you're 100% right. I mean, you're going back. I mean, we can talk about two things. First of all, that is absolutely correct. And that is the difference between what we're doing and what Free State people are doing in New Hampshire, is we are not looking for a savior to save us. Okay. So, Pierre Poilievre is going to save us. Maxime Bernier is going to save us. Stephen Harper was going to save us. And we are completely different. Most Canadians are used to this top-down thinking. Okay, we're going to vote for a savior, and in 5 years, Pierre Poilievre is going to save us. You can say, well, no, Mark, no, the election's in 3 years. No, it's 3 years to the election, and then 2 years for people to make excuses as to why we don't have freedom again. Okay, so it's 5 years for that. So what we're doing and what the Free State people do, and we're trying to emulate virtually everything that they do. I've got their bylaws sitting right on my desk right here. I'm writing bylaws for our future nonprofit corporation. What they did that is so genius is they limited themselves to, let's get liberty-minded people to move to New Hampshire. Let's connect them with other liberty-minded people. Let's help connect them to volunteers so they can do stuff, and let's do education.
Yeah.
That's their mission. That's our mission. And what's happened is, as these people moved into New Hampshire, and they and the people who are already there are creating all of these different groups that are involved. So the actual project does not get involved in specific politics. We don't endorse candidates, just like the Free State people. They don't endorse candidates. They don't endorse specific legislation. We don't try to steal other people's members. We're not competing with that. Our mission is to get people here and also to encourage them to work on these issues. So theoretically, over time, I don't look, if somebody wants to start a new party, that's great. That's not what the Free State people did. They were smart enough to realize, let's get enough people here, concentrate the liberty-minded folks, and start going to the various well, they have only two parties, so they'll go to the party, Democrat or the Republican, and they do have Democrat Free Staters, by the way.
Yeah.
So they go to each one and they say, okay, here are 5 points. What are you going to give us? No? Okay, we're going to the other guy. And that's the kind of power that we're talking about. Now, to exercise that kind of power, you also have to do your homework. So this is a process where, okay, we're trying to get people. Are you passionate about education? Great. Why don't you put together a little committee or a freedom pod, whatever you want to call it, working on education policy?
Yeah.
Do we want education choice? What choices do we want? How do we want to fund it? So that 5 years, 10 years from now, when there is when we have enough power to be able to go to some of these MLAs and say, here's what we need. We have the expertise. Not going to be me. I want people who are smarter than me working on the legal issues. Like I've got a whole raft of notes on a new constitution, a new Bill of Rights for New Brunswick. Some of it's based on stuff that I learned in Ecuador. A lot of it's based on the stuff that I learned from the Free State, from the New Hampshire Constitution,
Right.
And their Bill of Rights will blow your mind.
Yeah.
And so but it won't be me doing it. It would be, I will pass those notes on to whatever committee gets set up, so that by the time we're ready to go, we know how to reform the police, we know how to reform education, we know how to reform healthcare. And I'm learning a lot about that here too, that it's going to bring, I think we can do good things in New Brunswick because of it, So anyways,
well,
yeah, I think you're right on.
Well, I will say, because once again, I was listening to your interview with Just Right Media, and once again, it was a great interview. And I listened to you, gentlemen, and you were talking about how, at least in New Brunswick, first of all, you were mentioning how it's rather low population province, though there are a lot of rural areas, and some other aspects that I would say are at least conducive to bringing a project such as the one that you're initiating, anyways, to this province. And did you want to say something real quick there, Mark? Or?
No, I'm listening to you.
Okay.
I'm just trying to get myself centered in the camera here. That's all.
Yeah. Oh, no worries. So anyway, what I will say is, now apparently you looked into the political history just a bit, and so did the other gentleman. Now, what I will point out that I'm not sure if you both are familiar with this or not, is we've actually had 3 ridings in this province that were actually now he did mention, or it was you or him anyways, that mentioned about the riding in Fredericton, for the Green Party. Now, I will say the Greens have had their foot in a couple of ridings in the province, but another thing I'm not sure if you're familiar with is the People's Alliance that was originally started under Chris Dawson. Now, he unfortunately has crossed the floor to the Conservatives, right? So, and disbanded it, but someone else, I believe, has picked up the mantle and started the party. But what that told me is there's at least 3 ridings in this province of people who are willing to not vote for any of the establishment. I'm not saying I agree with all the People's Alliance positions, but what that tells me, just like what you gentlemen were acknowledging, is it tells you that there is some grounds in this province where the people are basically sick of the status quo. And because I'll add as well, because of the quite a big divergence in our population in terms of demographics, we have a lot of older people, who may very much still be, very much, whether they're happy with, but they're willing to go along with the status quo because they've more or less come to benefit from the status quo for many decades in life. But a lot of them are getting on in their years. New Brunswick is a province with a very aged, elderly population in her. But the people who are replacing them are people that, I've noticed a lot of them, like if the older people, pass on and their homes gets older, maybe some of the younger people or people from other jurisdictions that have maybe roots from this part of the province, maybe looking to retire, from Ontario or other places abroad. So there is fresh grounds for, like you gentlemen were suggesting, for some actual change. But like you're saying, is that's what you need, is you need these people to be coming into our provinces. And I think the onus is on us, is rather than, using government or politics, is what I've tried to do, and I'll just ask you folks if you've tried anything similar. Is in our small, I live in a rural community, and in our small rural communities, we all have these rec centers that you basically can use for events, and we already pay with them through taxations anyway, but you can rent them for like $50, $100 for to do your own event. And I even started in the summer. I did a couple of them, what's called Liberty lessons. So you can invite people, whether they're new members in the community or people that are already here, and mention them, about the fact that, this is something that we think is important in this part of the province, that we try to, gain back or even expand on our freedoms, and for the government to respect and acknowledge those. And I think that kind of education and kind of bringing the community together, because that's another big aspect of rural communities, is they're very closely knit. I've noticed it's, well, I've grown up in it, and they're very closely knit. So the more you can, do anything in your community to show where you want to bring community together and be a leader in any way, then you definitely will find some receptive grounds for that. And I don't know if you gentlemen or anyone in your project yet have tried any, like, putting on any events or maybe venues or anything that promote your project. Have you done anything like that as of yet? Or
Well, it's funny you ask. The secret sauce of the New Hampshire Free State Project, we have a liaison. I got to be careful because the Free State Project is not allowed to endorse anybody. Okay.
Right.
So, but we have a liaison person who is part of the Free State movement who may end up actually being the executive director, but full time. We don't know. But,
Right.
anyways, great guy named Derek Prue. You can watch the interview with him on our website.
Okay.
And one of the things that he and one of my supporters actually talked to Jeffrey Kaufman, who owns Library and Odyssey,
Odyssey. Yeah.
and both those people emphasize that the secret sauce of their project is face-to-face meetings. So, to answer your question, we have a gentleman who probably is going to be a director in the corporation, happens to own Atlantic Gold and Silver in Riverview. He said, I'm going to put on a meetup. And so he put on a meetup about a month and a bit ago. And he was expecting 3 or 4 people. He said, come to this sports bar on Mountain Road in Moncton, and let's talk freedom. He was expecting 3 or 4 people to show up. They were lined up out the door. There were 33 people lined up out the door.
Really?
Coming
That's
in to
excellent.
talk freedom. They had no formal presentation. They said, oh, we thought there was going to be a presentation. So then he had to, just recently, about 2 weeks ago, he rented a place in Riverview and had a new one. This time he had 39 people. A whole bunch of the original people came, plus 10 more. And so those are the secret sauce. And this is what I'm trying to convince and help the pods understand as well, because our moving coordinator right now, we're trying to map out all the freedom pods in New Brunswick, so that our biggest question when we get people that inquire, and a lot of, well, they'll come through the website usually. Where can I go? Invariably, the question is, where can I go to be with other freedom people? So our moving coordinator, Chandra, who I think is probably watching right now, she said she was, she is mapping out the pods and kind of getting a sense of how many, where they are, kind of what they're working on. And just in the last few weeks, she said she's been having some great success as they're starting to come on board. And one of the things that most of the pods have been oriented to surviving communism, not taking political action. And that's great, because we need to know how to freeze dry stuff. We need to know how to grow stuff. We need to know how to do barter, health stuff. All of that stuff is critical, absolutely
Yes,
critical.
sure.
Because as you know very well, our province was the most evil in Canada, trying to deny food to unvaccinated people. That happened after I left Canada. And I actually sent a message to my MLA, who I'd had a little meeting with. I can't talk about what was said, but I had a meeting to talk about my report, and I gave him my word I would not talk about what was said. But I will tell you that when that happened, I sent him an email and I said, if you are truly a Christian, then you need to put an end to this evil now. And of course, one day after Ken and Bonnie told the New Brunswick government they were going to shut down that market, it was over. But that fact that their minds even went there, I mean, there are 10 stages to genocide. Get a little off track maybe, but there are 10 stages to genocide. Um, and we were showing signs at 8 of them. Now, the 8th stage is actual killing people, exterminating people. So I'm not saying that that was happening at all, but we were showing signs and denying food to people. Oh my God, it's a very short and slippery slope to killing them. When you've made up your mind that we're going to starve people and make it hard for them to buy food, that's really scary. So anyway, sorry, what was your question
Yeah,
again?
yeah. Well, no, actually, I'm kind of glad that you brought up the in terms of religions, because that's another thing actually I've acknowledged. So I born and raised till I was 11, almost 12 years old in New Brunswick. My parents, due to work, because there was shortage of work back in the, so that would have been in the early 80s here on the old East Coast. So they moved me to Ontario as a young man, and it was massive, shell shock in terms of the difference. In the big city, I was in the East End of Toronto, Scarborough, and it was quite a big difference between the East Coast and out there. But what I did recognize, and I've subsequently moved back here in my, I guess, mid to late 20s. Once me and my wife had our children, we moved back here in New Brunswick. But what I did notice is whether it was when I was growing up or come back here, is religion is still very, very much, not as much, but it's still very much a part of the culture. And like, once again, in particular in the rural ridings and communities. And I have noticed the one thing that libertarians or liberty oriented people such as myself have in common is, at the very least, is a lot of religious people, because they place their authority in God. They perceive as God as their ultimate authority. So they're at least more than willing, or at least fellow travelers, in terms of not being ideologues and believing that the state, right, is this new omnipotent God. Because not sure how far you are down the philosophical road in terms of libertarian thought, but or the philosophy is, I firmly believe, and I've yet to see anything prove otherwise, that the state or statism, collectivism, authoritarian collectivism, but the whole concept of the state is basically supplanted old world religions like Christianity or Judaism, and it is basically a modern form of religion. And I see that, and of course, this 3-year experiment with COVID, the lockdowns, the mandates, and restrictions, I watched a lot of people who normally I would think are rather intelligent individuals, but just with, when I was raised in a religious family, I would see people that would reject things that are objectively true, provably so, based on their fundamental religious or ability to believe in things that actually aren't possible or are mystic in nature. And I see that a lot of people today in terms of this whole, like I say, 3-year experiment. But the one thing subsequent to that, because of the fact that some truth and information has finally started to come to surface and light, I see a lot of these people are having their day of reckoning and trying to figure out, wait a minute, I went along with these people who were touted to me as experts and these ultimate authorities that proved to be not just wrong on so many accounts, but wrong to the point where it caused a lot of harm to a lot of people that each and every one of us knew. So I just want to know what your thoughts in terms of that kind of a mindset among the masses.
You're batting 1,000 today, I think.
Thanks.
I think the one thing I remember what I was going to finish before I got
Okay.
off onto the stuff is just
Sure. Yeah.
is that we were working with the pods and they were mostly oriented to survival. We're talking about political action, and also a lot of them were very hesitant to meet face to face, and that's
Right.
one of the things that we encourage. We have a calendar on the site, so face to face meetings is so important. And it's you're not surviving communists. Okay, the communists aren't leaving you alone because you
No.
went off grid and you're somewhere. They're going to suspend your driver's license. They'll come hunting for you to get you back, and we don't know when that's going to happen. But anyways,
Right.
back to your new point here. I think it's very interesting that while the church, it's the same in Caledonia. I spent many years in there, in
Mhm.
Caledonia. It was individual Christians who were leading the fight for justice. It
Mhm.
really wasn't the churches. Oh
Right.
no,
Yes.
no,
Right.
no.
Exactly.
The
Yes.
churches as with COVID, the churches all bent the knee to Caesar in shame. And I think they had their moment to shine,
Yeah.
shine the light of Christianity and this love of justice to the world, and they caved. They caved, and so that's what makes it. I remember before we left Canada, I met a pastor from, a former pastor from in the Hillsborough area. Nice man, welcomed us to his home, to the town. And I said, "Oh, did you hear they arrested the pastor in St. John?" He says, "Yeah, but there are 800 other pastors in New Brunswick who didn't disobey the law." And I'm just looking at him. He says, "I guess you think that's a bad thing, eh?" I said, "Yeah." And so, but it was Christian. You look at Ken and Bonnie Gilliard, Christian pastors, those people, those people are amazing. Like my hat is completely off to them for everything they did, and including their role in stopping this shameful, evil attempt to deny food to people. So yeah, and
Yeah.
and like, look, I've got a great friend who's an atheist as well, and I respect him. He's a very good man. I trust him literally with my life. I really
Yeah.
would.
Oh yeah.
And but the problem is that atheists have this idea that, well, I can have a moral code,
Mm.
and my moral code comes from what? From me, and I intrinsically know what's good, so I'm not going to do X, Y, and Z. The problem is the atheist on the left, or see, I'm going to the right, I don't know, the left,
Right.
he's got a moral code too. And his moral code includes cutting penises and breasts off of young children and indoctrinating them sexually, and collectivism, and forcing you to take vaccines. Well, why is his moral code better than my friend's moral code? And my friend's moral code's pretty high. He's really
Mm.
good. But
Right.
the fact is that in my opinion, even if you're an atheist, you have to really recognize that the law laid down, let's call them the Ten Commandments, is pretty darn good. I mean, it's a good place to start. And so it allows us, and I think what's lacking in society and what's lacked in all of the people that were swore oaths to defend justice, human rights, medical, like bodily autonomy, all swore oaths. They all got paid, from the doctors, the lawyers, the politicians, forget the media, but all these people swore oaths to 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 be safety valves, if you want, for society, and they all forgot fundamental values. Okay, so in my report, again, nbfree.ca downloads, go to the download section, I
Yeah.
outline the Nuremberg Code. How is it that after 70 years after death
Mm.
camps and medical experimentation, suddenly we throw out the Nuremberg Code just like
Yeah.
that? Just didn't exist anymore. Yeah, now we're going to get pregnant women, to take an experimental drug. What, we forgot what happened with thalidomide? I'm not. I have no medical training. Why is it up to me to become a pseudo expert in vaccine technology and studies and the medical ethics and stuff like that? I shouldn't have to. None of us should have to do with that.
Yeah.
You know. And
Well, I
then you
tell
have, yeah, so you have all these people. So fundamental values, the Nuremberg Code, the Charter of
yeah.
Rights, the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, gone, gone.
Mhm.
Okay, the UNESCO Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights, gone. I guess we're not members of the UN anymore. Not that I have a lot of use for the UN, but these lefties, these people who forced, told my wife and me that we were plague rats and should be kept out of hospitals,
Mm.
they supposedly believe in it. So we have to return to these fundamental values, because let's take the charter. The charter is not there for the good times. It's
Yeah.
there for the times like COVID, when
Yeah.
everybody's panicking and everything's going like, oh my God, what should we do? Let's read the charter.
Mm.
Okay. Why don't we read the charter? Oh, okay. And if they had only done that, we would not have a country so divided today that I doubt that it's possible to put it together. Okay.
Right.
So that's my take on it. Is that everybody who was paid and sworn to protect us failed us. And
Yeah.
again, you read in the report, like, who am I? I'm just a schlub. I don't have a PhD after my name. I told them, I sent it out by hard copy to every MLA in New Brunswick. Not one of them wanted to meet the medical expert whose paper
Mm.
I cited. They all have blood on their hands, in my opinion,
Hmm.
every one of them.
Well,
So it's all about fundamental values. Sorry,
yeah.
go ahead.
Well, no, well, to me, like I say, the biggest thing that I noticed, and this is the part where, like I say, my Christian upbringing and background, it was a lot of it. Well, my relationship with God is a personal thing. Once again, I never really relied on the church, and even my grandmother, who was the one that taught me the most about religion, she went to pretty much every church, feeling the grounds. But it was still very much a personal thing. But what I've noticed is people will use some of the concepts that were used in Christianity, and what I've noticed, that this concept of the greater good. But what I love about the history of Christianity or Judaism or any of these Christian or these fundamentals is the advancements of humanity to the point where, so when you're talking about the Enlightenment era, where a lot of the great thinkers, come up with the idea of, well, wait a minute, the greater good. What is this greater good? That, and coming to the idea, which actually somewhat aligns to certain aspects, especially the New Testament, in terms of placing the individual at the core. Because the problem with this whole thing with COVID was the idea that you can sacrifice the individuals if it's for the greater good. The problem, of course, is who gets to define the concept of the greater good. And we've watched the 20th century alone how terrible those kind of experiments can play out, if taken to some pretty nasty ends. And you can get people on board with that, and people that typically, like I say, that they believe that they're doing this for the right. But to me, if you can understand the one thing about the 10 commandments, which would be perfectly aligned with what I would consider actual fundamental rights today, is you're not imposing proper rights in their natural state. In the negative sense, you're not imposing or forcing or compelling or coercing anyone into anything. Negative rights can be universal, and that's the thing. You don't have to rely on the old days when you had to rely on a preacher to tell you these things, or a priest, right, or a rabbi. Well, now you can use your own mind, your objective mind, to figure out, well, if it can be universalized, so don't hit, don't steal, right, don't murder. Well, that can all be universalized. We can all not do those things, and that can be universalized. But if you say that someone can or has the authority to do these things, well, that's the minute you're introducing, that's your creep into tyranny. Because the minute you make an exception, which is basically what government is, it's an exception where certain people have the right to do things that we can't. And that's where I don't necessarily think relying on the Bill of Rights or the Charter is really helpful today, because of the fact that, well, Section 33, and then you just take into account the Emergencies Act, right? People believe, based on legal interpretation, I think it's a terrible one, but based on their legal interpretation, well, their belief is that the Charter was written in such a way that it gave them the right or the authority to override our rights. Whereas if we had a population of not just New Brunswickers, but Canadians who actually understand intrinsically that your rights are inherent and inalienable. So there's no way, if you can take something away, it's not a right, it's a privilege. If they just had that basic grasp or understanding, then I don't believe people would have went along as in such large numbers as they did. And even in a province like New Brunswick, now a lot of them did wait till they were forced or compelled to, in terms of the masking, especially in some of the small rural areas. But the minute they were told, I did see the overwhelming majority of the people get on board, right? So they were willing to deny their own principles, right, and things that they would probably carry through in their lives as being the right thing to do, based on, once again, that political edict. And that to me is a major concern. What are your thoughts on
It's actually very frightening. I think one of the things that really, I think, that scarred us. We had 45 days to get out of Canada. We had to find somewhere else to live. And again, it's not that I didn't want to fight, but once you've had your rights stripped away and you've been dehumanized, and then your prime minister is calling you names and then locks you into the country, I had to ask, like, what's the worst that could happen? And so, we got out. But the thing that scarred us the most was realizing that some people aren't going to like this. And I've said this over and over again, so I'm not backing away from it. I think that most Canadians were no better and are no better than Nazi era Germans. I'm not saying they're all Nazis by choice. I'm saying the
Yeah.
Nazi era Germans, in
Yeah.
that they allowed the government and the media to manipulate them so much into hating the other that, as I said to you, I was called a plague rat. I was told to my face, I hope you die. I hope they keep you out of the hospital.
Mm.
My premier, my prime minister, the Toronto Star, of course, that famous front page,
Yeah.
that where they printed these vile, uh, hateful things against unvaccinated people. And I'm telling you, that would fit at Yad Vashem. You
Oh,
just change the time and the wording.
yeah.
That would have fit in the Holocaust Museum. Okay, it really would have. That was vile propaganda, and I think that so. And I should put it this way: some people in Canada would have loved to have rounded us up, taken us to camps, and shot us personally.
Mm-hmm.
Not a doubt in my mind.
Yeah.
Small group, but not that small. A
Mm.
bigger group would have loved to have watched and laughed at us, but the
Yeah.
biggest group of all would be those who didn't care how many of us disappeared.
Mm.
And that realization, as a member of the Canadian Forces, former, it's a while ago, but as an ex-soldier and a peacekeeper, that was hard. That's hard to come to terms with. That
Mm.
I will never look at I don't look at Canada the same way anymore. I don't look at my fellow citizens. I'll give you a perfect example. Went across the street, tell my neighbor, I had to explain to them, we're leaving the country. We feel that we really have to get out of here. I did not see the convoy coming. I'd done all the protests. I tried to reach out to the MLAs with no luck, and I did not see a peaceful solution to this.
Mm.
I really didn't, and I was a little concerned about what was happening. So I went across the street. I explained to him why we had to leave, and he's looking at me the whole time with this big grin on his face. And his first words are, "Can I get a deal on your tools?" Well, if you know anything about the Nazi era, you understand why that matters to me,
Yeah.
why that was significant to me personally. And so I realized that's when I realized. So today, I don't I don't look at Canada the same way anymore. I don't have the love that I used to have for my country. My country rejected me. And I've talked to other Canadian refugees, some in El Salvador, Costa Rica, and Mexico. We did Zooms on this. And one of
Right.
them's an RCMP officer. He
Right.
saw all of this. He saw a document in late 2020 that scared him so much that he got his family out to Mexico in 2 weeks. His mother or his parents, his brother, and his own family. He said, we have to get out. Now he says, well, it's probably a little early, but he saw this document. He says, it's hard to find now, but he knew exactly what was going to happen back in
Mm.
late 2020. And
Mhm.
so, and he says, our country rejected us. And so I look at it now, and irrespective of how I feel personally and how you might feel personally, I have to look at it objectively. Is there a national political solution? Everybody's consumed. PPC versus CPC, and the
Yep.
arguments. Oh my goodness!
Oh yeah.
Guys,
Very much
come on.
familiar. Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
if, okay, one party doesn't deserve to be elected dog catcher because they're the party of collaborators who
Mhm.
sat by and allowed these liberal and NDP sadists
Yeah.
to use segregation and dehumanization to try and force my wife and me into medical experimentation. And you think I'm voting for that one? No. So they don't deserve to be elected. And probably because the leftist parties will again form a coalition, they're probably not going to get into power or keep
Mm.
it. The other party, unfortunately, I love Maxime Bernier. I love the things that the party stands for. I'll certainly vote for him.
Yeah.
He's not going to win it. And even if by miracle, that the PPC scored this wonderful breakthrough, or even Pierre Poilievre, I'm told I was insulted because I pronounced his name now, Poilievre or whatever the heck his name is.
Yeah.
I don't like. Some people really matters to them how I pronounce the name of a collaborator who sat silent while his party, Blows my mind. Anyways, so even if Poliver or Max got a majority, complete majority, took the whole house, they can't change the three things that will guarantee our freedom.
Yeah.
Policing, education, and health. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to help people understand how futile the national discussion really is. And you're going to wait 5 years. 5 years, you could be building freedom in New Brunswick. We could be halfway to creating a dynamic, vibrant, freedom-based province where parents never have to worry about their kids.
Well, listen, Mark, I'm glad you brought up all those things, because actually that was something that I wanted to actually question on too, because it's something that I think about all the time. So you brought up, the police and healthcare and education, and I'm with you there. As a matter of fact, my youngest son, who just bought a home probably half a mile from me, great, which is awesome.
Good for you.
His long-term girlfriend, and they plan on getting married and have kids and stuff. Anyway, she's done the entire teaching school, but right now she's actually working with young children. She hasn't gone into education as of yet. But even in terms of, like I say, the education and policing, what I'm seeing and what I've seen so much, and I'm asking your help here, and maybe you can help us try to figure out what's the best way, is once these institutions have become so corrupted to the core, and I've reported on this stuff on my YouTube channel, and actually a bunch of them are even on Rumble and Odyssey now. But I can go back and point out countless times where I've done videos or live streams pertaining to the RCMP, and the standards they've been lowered to the point where basically, actually I named one of my videos which was tens of thousands of views. So obviously it was quite receptive to people, was if you got a pulse, you get hired by the RCMP now. And my problem, of course, is because when you have a culture of it's kind of enticing the worst among us into these institutions, then I see how very, very difficult it is to get the good people, the good people with good intentions, to want to even go towards these. And I'm seeing this as it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's this race to the bottom, as I've termed it a few times. Is how do we get people that want to go into education or healthcare or the police, when you have, like I say, they're going to be predominantly surrounded by very, very petty tyrants and and authoritarian type minded people. So what are your thoughts on what's the best way to get people and to entice them into these positions?
We have to concentrate the forces of liberty in a small province where we can set the agenda, and we can slowly. It's not happening overnight. Everybody wants to have the magic solution. Okay,
Yeah.
there isn't one. It's hard work. It's building. Look, maybe there's a committee that looks a freedom pod led by a cop who says, okay, here's how we get you into the police and get you some training and stuff like that. And same with teaching. These answers are going to come as we start building the project and as people start believing in the project. But if you're talking about policing, I think the first thing is you thank the RCMP for their service, and you institute a provincial police force. Now that's no guarantee, because the Ontario Provincial Police was corrupt as hell.
Yeah.
Politically.
Right.
But that's the start. Then what you do, you have to create. I think the first step is we create a new constitution, a new Bill of Rights, and we start talking about what's in there. I got a list of stuff that's got to go, should go into it, and we have to get to a point. Here's the problem: is that, as we said, the charter. The only remedy to a charter violation is a civil lawsuit that's going to take 10 years to get to the Supreme Court. Maybe a little faster. Maybe if you're Brian Peckford, you can get it faster. But they didn't even want to hear his argument. So that tells you something about the court.
Right.
So what we have to do is we have to criminalize violations of the Provincial Bill of Rights. Okay, so that the politician, and we reverse onus, even the charter. Okay, so we're still within Canada, but we've got a provincial constitution, a provincial Bill of Rights, and we use a Provincial Offences Act to criminalize. Okay, somebody says, "Oh, Mark, this criminal." Not talking about criminal code, people. Provincial Offences Act, and we make it a crime to violate those things. So on charter issues, We could pass legislation that says, hey, it's the government that has to go all the way to the Supreme Court
Mm.
in order to try and violate somebody's charter rights, not the victim.
Right.
And the victim has his legal fees paid by the government. Okay,
Right.
so we reverse onus. Like right now, it's the poor little victim has to find a lawyer willing to fight and shell out $100,000 or more.
Yeah.
We got to change that. We have to reach a point where the government and their bureaucrats in New Brunswick are terrified to even think about violating our rights at the
Yeah.
charter level, which is a federal document that's supposed to apply. I don't even know like what the charter is anymore, like what that is. So we have to do that provincially, and we can actually use provincial offenses. We'll talk to a lawyer. That's what we would do.
Right.
Okay. But we have to reach that point. But to reach that point, we have to build first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting process because a lot of people will say, oh, Alberta's freedom. Okay. Well, I'm just reading Corey Morgan's fabulous book
Mm.
called The Sovereigntist Handbook. And I got to
Right.
tell you, I'm about 2/3 the way through.
Okay.
And this guy used to run a party, a separatist party in Alberta. And I'm telling you, anybody who thinks that they better start rushing over to Alberta for the referendum is sadly mistaken. They really should read that book, Corey Morgan, The Sovereigntist Handbook. He talks about how you have to create a provincial police force, you have to create a provincial pension plan, you have to make the province work, which it
Right.
doesn't work. And we have to do the same in New Brunswick, not so that we can separate, but so that we can attract the best, the brightest, and these people will come in and build what we need to build. Now, just on self-defense rights, I'm a big believer in self-defense rights. Okay, I think the charter actually, gun rights are charter rights. Now, some
Yeah.
people say I'm full of dog do, but those people don't understand the Overton window.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would strongly suggest every conservative, when you finish this podcast or whatever you call it, broadcast, go and Google, search Overton window. It's from the Mackinac Center, and spelled without a K at the end, Mackinac, but without the K. And go and learn that about how we shift public opinion.
Yeah.
My position is that gun rights are charter rights. Why?
Yeah.
Because we have it says it right in the charter: life, liberty, and security of the person. I take the position that security of the person includes the ability to defend yourself and having the tools to defend yourself. That's me. Okay.
Yeah.
And I would love to see a charter. I haven't been able to find out if anybody's ever tried to make a charter argument for it. And my position is that the government is actually violating the charter by denying people the right to defend themselves. So, as an instance, let's look at Nova Scotia. 22 people slaughtered by a
Yeah.
guy with no gun license and
Yep.
and illegal guns. Oh, and about what, $400,000 of money, I believe, from the RCMP.
Right. Right.
And immediately thereafter, the prime minister and the RCMP commissioner are using it as a leverage to steal people's guns from them, instead of asking the fundamental question: what would have happened if one or two of those victims had a concealed sidearm and knew how to use it?
Yeah.
There would have been 22 fewer funerals. Okay,
Sure.
so that's my position. So I would look at that and I would say, look, how do you? Well, the Criminal Code, the Firearms Act. Okay, it's actually pretty easy.
Yeah.
It's not the ability that's lacking to be able to do these things. It's the will to
Yeah.
do it. Okay, so here's how you do it. You replace the RCMP with a provincial force. You get that, let the dust settle. Then you
Yeah.
create an auxiliary. And it's an armed auxiliary that's only open initially to former police officers and former members of the Canadian Forces. Obviously, background check. And those people, once you have that dust settled, then you open it up to every law-abiding citizen in New Brunswick over the age of 18 without a violent criminal record.
Mm.
And then how you would pay them is you would pay them with one Glock. Well, we can debate the model, but one Glock. Okay. Some people, no, I don't want a Glock. Okay. Whatever. We'll get a committee together. We'll decide which one everybody's going to get. So you pay these people one Glock, one AR-15, and 1,000 rounds a year. That's their payment.
Mm.
And they're required to carry their sidearm when off duty when practicable. Okay.
Mm.
We have a Canadian Forces sniper in Hillsborough, where I used to live. Okay.
Mhm.
These people who are skilled enough can shut down anything. And if we had somebody like him in Nova Scotia, or people were able to have arms who had the
Yeah.
training, okay, I'm not
Yeah.
talking about letting, like the New Hampshire, the New Hampshire people, they don't quite understand Canadian culture yet,
Mm.
but we're trying. And
Yeah.
Canadians are not going to go for Joe Blow walking around with no training and with a concealed weapon. But so in Canada, we have to do that. There has to be training. There has to, because that's the only way you're going to be able to sell that. But the basic idea is that you should be able to defend your life, your liberty, and your property.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, actually, let me just respond to that there, Mark, in terms of the New Brunswick thing. This is actually one of those few areas. Now, I know Alberta is very much, conducive to the gun culture as well, because they have a large, rural population. But I would say the same holds true for New Brunswick. And as someone, like I say, growing up, even when I was just just a wee little fella when I was growing up, every man and his dog had guns, and many times that your gift as a kid would have been your first 22, right? So, and to be honest with you, from someone, especially when I think about living in a big urban center such as Toronto, I think of some of the people, especially the progressives in a province such as Ontario, would say, "Oh, those hillbillies," in a province like New Brunswick with these low education and all. But I tell you, as someone that grew up here, and I've been into the camps in Dungarvan many, many times, not just as a kid, but as an adult, where you have even large groups of full-grown men drinking. Some of them quite excessive, I'll add, but very, very few times, even myself personally. I think one time as a kid, it was an incident that happened where it was mistaken out in the woods where someone might have got shot by another hunter, but it was a hunting accident kind of a deal. But very few times you hear of incidents of like actual children or any other people being harmed by gun owners. And a lot of times, like I say, these gun owners, might have been grandfathered in where they didn't have to register weapons or anything like that. And they were never they didn't have to go take firearms training. They didn't have to get a permit or anything, but it was very much, recognized and acknowledged. I think in most human beings anyways, without anyone pressing them or forcing them into some kind of education, is if you're going to have a weapon in your home, you're going to want to do what is right and what's going to protect, your children and other people, right? So I think most people, especially in these rural communities or in the province of New Brunswick in general, are already conducive, and they have members of their family, even if they themselves don't own weapons, they have at least enough memory in their past from their past that they know that owning a gun is not an automatic something that you should fear. So actually, this is one of the few provinces that I think you would get along much easier with people having like a personal responsibility and accountability in terms of weapons, ownership of weapons, and defense. I don't hear of too
I,
many. Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Uh, and some people, if anybody's listening who's saying, "Well, Margaret, oh, that sounds really dangerous." The New Hampshire Free State, New Hampshire, has probably some of the laxest gun laws in all of America.
Yeah.
You can actually have and carry a open carry a pistol with no training and no license. Now, that scares me, but the facts speak for themselves. New Hampshire has the lowest incidence of murder by gun in the country.
Yeah.
And so, just an interesting anecdote told to us by Derek Prue, our liaison with the Free State movement.
Right.
BLM was burning down cities in America, as we all know. They came to, I can't remember what the city was. I don't know if it was Manchester. But they came to some place. They were going to do a protest. And all the citizens came out and sat in the street in their lawn chairs with their guns on their laps.
Mm.
And the protest was over, and not one window got broken, and that was it. And
Nice.
so you have this, the scaremongers want to say, "Oh, it'll be so," and that is in a state where there's no. They just passed legislation in New Hampshire that forbids the state government
Mm.
from cooperating or enforcing federal gun regulations.
Right. Yeah.
Safest state in America. problem.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, let me just point this out, Mark, because whether you're talking even states like Texas or Florida, or even just the very idea, what I try to help people so they understand, because that's one thing that when you bring up as as subject matter, guns, it does get people a little bit on edge on their seat, especially if you're talking about Canadians. But what I like to point out is, especially if you care about the vulnerable or the people in society, let's say like women who are susceptible to potential threats from predators or dangers, right? Is the one thing I will say, and if you do live in a state or any jurisdiction where your gun rights, your right to self-defense is respected. I mean, there are, like I say, jurisdictions in the US where it's not just open carry, but concealed carry is a normal is actually normal. And the beautiful thing about something like that, people think, ooh, concealed. Now, keep in mind, first and foremost, that a criminal doesn't care what laws are written. So anyone that has the ill intention is going to have the ill intention. But the ability to have even something on the books in terms of concealed carry. So let's say your wife or your daughter or someone that lives in a jurisdiction that does have the potential for crime, right, or for her to be violently, attacked or anything. Even if she's not the kind of person that wants to carry weapon, if you have the legal right to do so, there's no way for that perpetrator, right, that violent criminal that maybe has ill intentions. There's no way for them to know whether you are armed or not. So that is at very least, that's a little bit more of a bulwark or something that may prevent that person from wanting to inflict harm on you because they don't know, right? Whereas
that's a that's
whereas
a
if
great.
you yeah,
Yeah,
whereas
sorry. So no,
if you know if everyone's unarmed, like the places that have the highest crime rates are the places that have really restrictive gun rights. So the criminals recognize, well, I have a free for all for all these people who are predominantly unarmed, so I can basically go in and do whatever I want because I recognize, and I see that actually play out not just in terms of the media, but like I say, I've seen in my own personal life where what keeps people treating each other with honesty and respect. It's not just the borders and the fences, right? That keeps neighbors honest, but it's also the fact that, yeah, I don't know, maybe that person has the ability to defend themselves. So it kind of keeps us all a little bit, at least it doesn't guarantee anything, but I think it's a little bit better than, especially in these rural areas where the cops a half hour away. Right.
well, exactly. Or
Right.
they're too scared to go in and face them. I think there was an RCMP officer, a female one,
Yeah.
that was too afraid to go and confront this gunman.
Right.
I was listening to Paul Palango talk about that at
Right.
one point because he really knows the RCMP. But you bring up a couple of points again. Uh, Gun rights are women's rights.
Mm-hmm.
Why shouldn't why should we allow women to be undefended against predators? And you also bring the second point. The other point is like I see the open carry. I think that really number one it makes people really uncomfortable. I
Mm-hmm.
understand why they do it because they're asserting their rights. And the thing that we learned in Caledonia, and Gary McHale, our leader, said this over and over again. I think it's even in his book, in the book here. Don't surrender 1 millimeter of your rights, not
Mm-hmm.
1 millimeter,
Right.
because next time it's 2, 4, 8, and before you know it, you're gone. So
Yeah.
don't surrender that. So I understand why they do it, but I kind of like concealed carry. I like that idea. Okay, it's not in anybody's face, but
Yeah.
everybody knows it's possible.
Right.
Exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
So that would be my preference. I think it's also better that the criminals don't know if you're armed.
Exactly.
And you also have to have. I mean, listen. I hate to make this all about gun rights. I'm just using that one example.
Yeah.
Just this one example
Mhm.
of how a province could exercise its actual power to fight tyranny. Just that's
Right.
just the one of just one tiny one example is the gun display. This
Yeah.
I call it self defense. Doesn't have to be a gun.
Yeah.
Like listen, you can't even like the Free State people. Derek asks, "Oh, can you guys open carry some bear spray or pepper spray and just to assert your rights?" I said, "Yeah, that would get us in jail." Really? I said, we're not even allowed to. I mean, I guess if we were going hunting, I think we can have it to go if we were on a legitimate hunting trip. But you get caught with that, and you're not on a hunting trip, you're probably getting charged with, I can't think of the crime. Well, why can't we carry a bear spray? I mean, like please. We're just going to be at the mercy of whoever wants to mess with us. But the other thing you have to also have that goes with this is
Mhm.
you have to have clear rules of engagement. So in the
Right.
military,
Yeah.
you have okay. Under what circumstances am I allowed to draw my weapon and fire my weapon?
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
those have to be crystal clear. Under these circumstances, A, B, and C, you can
Yeah.
draw your weapon and use it to try and convince an attacker to leave you.
Yeah.
I.e., you have two people that are attacking you, or you have one person with a knife, you're allowed to draw your weapon. You are
Mhm.
not allowed to fire it unless they advance. That kind of thing. So they would
Right.
have to
Yeah.
be hashed out with
Yeah.
people who are far more knowledgeable about firearm safety and stuff. I'm just going by my military days. So
Right.
everything has to be worked out. But it's just the idea. I just want to plant this idea that it's not the inability that's lacking,
Right.
it's the willpower. And
Yeah.
what we have to do as free provincers or free province ambassadors, over time, is we convince the MLAs that it's time to exercise some power for freedom.
Mhm.
And I would rather go too far towards freedom than not enough.
I'm with you there. Now, I do realize we're a little bit past the hour mark now, and for the sake of not going too long with these live streams, I did want to kind of get to the point. Now, I was checking out your website, and really great job you did on that website there. It's lots of great information there. I did notice there's even some events. Is there or events? Is there anything in particular that you would like to promote or let people know about in terms of anything that might be coming up? Or
Sure. If you go to the calendar, just click on the events, and we have all the different events that'll be in there. And we're starting to get people starting to submit their own events. So you can actually, if you have a freedom related event, a meetup or whatever, the Wellness Hub just had an event on there, or our meetup that David Ford did, a couple, you can put them on for free. You have to use a desktop computer for some reason, and you need to give us a picture and contact information for you that goes on the website. So a name and an email address. You can put them up for free. All I do is check them, make sure they're complete, and as long as they're not for the Communist Party of Canada, pretty much, you can put them up for free. So every 2 weeks, and you'll see it's filled right now because it's an autofill feature. Every 2 weeks, I do a Q&A for new movers. So this Monday is canceled because I'm going to be out of town, probably without internet. But the next one I think is March 27, and you can come in and ask me anything. So what we do is the first thing is I give a very brief overview of what the mission is of the project, and then I'll take questions from new movers. So we'll have people in from Ontario, and then questions from people inside the province who are new to the project. So those are the priority. And then once we're finished that, then we talk about whatever you want to talk about. You want to talk about Danielle Steele. You want to talk about Alberta. You want to talk about Pierre Poilievre and Poilievre and this hatchet job over Christine Anderson. You want to talk about that? Glad to,
you know,
we'll talk about anything.
actually, I'm glad you brought that up because I'm still patiently waiting, and I am not the kind of person that just gleans over the headline. I read every article word right from the top to the bottom, and I'm still waiting. What are these? I hear that she's anti-immigrant and anti-Islam, or she's an Islamophobe or something, but I'm not seeing any examples. And the crazy part, you would think that anyone in the established media that wants to do a hit piece on someone, the fact that they're leaving out or omitting any examples, well, that kind of raises some suspicion
Well,
because
it's so funny. It's so
right,
funny you say that because there's somebody on Twitter who
yeah,
said, "Yeah, she's a Nazi and she hates immigrants," and they posted. I said, "Okay, well, let's see your evidence." So she posts up two different articles, and as soon as you click on the article, it's about how the AFD, which I don't ask me what it stands for, but it's her party, actually kicked somebody out of the party for making some disgusting remark about immigrants, I think it was.
mm,
So, and then the second report was actually a Reuters report. And both of them, I mean, I posted it up. I said, I just love it when liberals own themselves because both of her so-called evidence pieces prove the complete opposite. So, like
mm,
you, I haven't seen anything
yeah,
that would warrant that. And I think it's just despicable for Polyev, whatever you want to call him, to knuckle under to the media. Now,
Mm.
now there's another guy who's in the news who's fairly well known, and some people are kind of running for mayor. Well, I was invited to speak at an event this guy was going to speak at, so I said, I'll do some due diligence, and I find some really awful stuff about him, screen capped by antihate.ca. Now, left wing, the source, could it be fabricated?
Mm-hmm.
And he's supposed to be this big freedom leader. Well, I go into Rebel, and there he's on Rebel, basically doubling down on everything he said because they had his stuff there, and people don't want to believe it. And this is something we in the freedom movement, the media is going to have a field day with this guy. Okay, like in Caledonia, they were desperate to prove that we were white supremacists. We went up against, we had lawsuits going back against the Ontario Provincial Police Union. Okay, they were desperate to prove that we were white supremacists. In the end, they had to settle with us because there's no evidence. But let me tell you, the stuff that this guy has written and said is beyond the pale. And there is a segment within the so-called freedom movement that is very willing to overlook real, true, damning stuff just because the guy says stuff that they happen to like. And I do my best to alienate them and keep them away. I don't want them in New Brunswick. My New Brunswick includes Jewish people.
Yeah.
Right? Enough said.
Yeah.
So sorry. What was your?
Yeah. No. I'm completely agreement with you there. That's the thing is, and I guess that's why even during the PPC years when I was a founding member, I helped support the party. I promoted it. I interviewed dozens of candidates and I tried my best, but there was some elements, and it took me a little while to weed them out. Fortunately, I think they're mostly gone now, but there was some definitely elements. This is the problem with these joining these collectives or political organization is, it usually comes with some baggage because, like I say, I might agree with, someone especially, let's say you're against the mandates. You can be against the mandates, but I also have a lot of disagreements with some of the people that so to me, that's if we focus the things on principles and ideas rather than personalities or cults, right? That to me, that's a big thing.
What do we fundamentally believe in? What do we believe in? What does freedom look like? If your idea of freedom is some leader who's made vile anti-Semitic I'm not talking, I mean, Jew-hating, Holocaust-denying comments, and that's who you want leading. I don't want to be near. That's not my definition of freedom. Exactly. And I've been down the road. I've been deposed by $1,000 an hour lawyer of the Ontario Provincial Police Union trying to prove I was a white supremacist. So I've been there. I've got the T-shirt. I've not my first rodeo. These people can kill, can destroy your movement.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I say, so this is great having this conversation. And actually, it's funny you mentioned about the T-shirt because I was actually going to ask you as kind of one of the last questions was, is there anything? So there's a word of mouth, obviously, which I will definitely do my best to help get the Free Province Project initiative out there and on people's minds. But is there anything like swag or apparel or anything that you guys are? Sorry, go ahead.
There you go. Sorry, you blanked out there. I didn't know if anybody could hear me or see me or what was going on. You have to start that again, please. So.
Oh, okay. No, I was just curious to know if there's anything. So, like I say, in terms of word of mouth, I'm sure there's lots of people out there that are going to help you. I'm just one of them to help to get this project off the ground and get people, talking about this stuff. But is there another way for even just just general people walking around? Maybe a T-shirt, maybe a hat. Like, do you folks have any apparel or swag or anything?
Yeah, we do. Yeah. We have. I think the first thing that you can do is join the networking list, which I saw you already did.
I did.
That is nbfree.ca, and you'll see the link almost right at the top, right where it says join the movement. I see it right on your screen there. And get on the list. That's our primary way to do it.
Right.
we're somewhat in early stages. So I
Yeah.
started the project as an exercise to see if anybody was interested. And then the Free Staters came on board, which really helped propel it. And we're starting to really make moves. So we're relatively early stage. You can follow me on Twitter at follow the project on Twitter at um, NB Free Province. So at NB Free Province on Twitter. And also, my personal account is CDN Refugee, Canadian Refugee. But it's under my name. I just started putting my name up there. Those are the things that you can do now. If you see meetups, if you're going to hold a meetup, for example, if you're a member of a pod, let's say that you're a member of a pod, the Freedom Pod, get in touch with Chandra, Chandra Best, our moving coordinator. She wants to talk to you about your pod. And she's at move move at nbfree.ca, and just let her know what you're doing. That would be a big help for us, so that we can refer people to you. We want to be a resource to the pods. And the second thing is, if you are holding an event that's freedom related, I would encourage you to try and do, if possible, some in-person, even if it's just at a bar. And if you
Yeah.
want to see examples, go to fsp.org. So Free
Yeah.
State Project,
Yeah.
fsp.org. Look for their
Yeah.
calendar and you'll get the idea. Let's do
Yeah.
meetups. Let's meet in person. Let's talk freedom. You can join me on the Q&As every 2 weeks and ask your questions and stuff. So that's what we need right now. We do have some merchandise and we're working on getting it out there. We sold a bunch of it at the last meetup. David Ford's
Right.
looking after that. So we're working on getting that online. So yeah, there's definitely merch, and it looks amazing. Oh,
Nice.
here's one of them. Here you go. Oh, there we go. This is our license. People love these things.
Oh yeah,
Goes
that's
on the
cool.
front,
Yeah.
and it just helps people identify who you are.
Excellent.
And
Yeah. No,
and
that's great.
it's very heavy aluminum. It's probably twice as thick as a regular plate, so
Very
they're worth
good.
the money. They're like $25
Yeah.
plus 15 shipping plus some HST. So they're a little pricey, but they're good quality.
Well, let me just say two more things there, Mark. If you wouldn't, then just make sure after we do finish up on this live stream, if you wouldn't mind, just in another follow-up reply in our messages, is just give me all the links to anything and anyone, like you say, that you want people to be privy to, and I'll make sure to post that in the links of the description of the live stream. And then another thing I just wanted to ask, this would be something you'd have to have someone that's kind of into production, but just like with the Free State project, do you have anyone that maybe wants to, that maybe has the where without the skills and maybe the funding, or maybe you could do some crowdsourcing or some funding of someone that maybe wants to put together some kind of video or mini documentary or something to kind of show a little parts of the province, what the positive things that makes it more conducive to liberty loving type of folks that want to move here, more or less something to use as promotional material, that can be easily passed around on social media.
We were just talking about that. David Ford wants to do that, and I suggested let's wait till the incorporation is done, and we're just,
Right.
we're taking our time with that, getting the bylaws
Okay.
right and stuff.
Yep.
And so he wants to do that, and of course, as you know, the Free State Project, somebody's produced like a 12-part documentary about them, and that I think will happen naturally. But yes, I'd like to have something like that. And I think we want to start showcasing New Brunswick as well. So we're going to probably change platforms to a WordPress platform, self-hosted. And just as I said, this was just an experiment to see if anybody was interested, and apparently people love the idea. So absolutely, we want to do that.
Well, that's the beautiful thing. And I keep pointing out, and you're just the newest example when people say, well, what can one man do? Right. So I mean, a go-to one in recent years for me has been Elon Musk in terms of, well, what can one man do? Right now, of course, I recognize that it's not just the one man. There's other people that's going to bring those ideas to fruition, but all ideas come from the individual mind. And you were someone that sat around and you thought about these things, and you not just thought about it as an idea, but now you've brought this to fruition. And by doing that, I mean, it's brought you to, to meet not just myself, but many others I've seen now. So it is a way, and it's a grassroots kind of way. And once a way, it's the proper way for people to do things is to reach out and create communities that is conducive to this. Because once again, without, sound like a broken record, that culture, we have to create the culture that we want. We have to create the communities that are conducive to that kind of live, let live mentality. And I definitely believe that's possible in a province like New Brunswick. So I, for one, can say that I'm really appreciative of
Well,
you
thank you.
coming
You
up
know,
with this idea,
I
Mark.
really have to give credit to Robert Vaughn, who interviewed me
Right. Yep.
in
Yep.
his
Sure.
home in that interview. He was the one who said to me, I'd had this idea years ago. Oh, what if we could take over politically Prince Edward Island? And of course, now I realize that that's not going to work for various reasons we won't get into. But
Right.
Robert Vaughn was the one, I was talking to him about this, and he said, well, somebody's doing that in New Hampshire. And that's what started it all. So I really, I want to give a huge shout out first to Robert, and second of all to these amazing people from the Free State Project who have been very generous with their time. I was invited to speak at Pork Fest last year at their big week-long celebration, but of course I'm unvaccinated scum. I wasn't allowed to get in. I did buy a ticket for this year, so I'm hoping that will change.
Right.
But I wanted, if I can leave you with one thought that I think
Sure.
you just touched on about what one person can do. We learned in Caledonia, we were never more than 6 or 7 people, and sometimes 10 people, that, as Christy Blatchford, the author of Helpless, the book, the best-selling book, said, you guys changed history. We did it with a very small group of people, people who you could count on to be there all the time.
Right.
And one year, Gary McHale, because everybody's first question when you do a protest was, how many people were there? I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. Why? Because it doesn't matter. What? And Gary McHale taught me the lesson. He said, Mark, I have a homework assignment for you. It's around Christmas time one year. He says, I want you to go see a movie. It's called Amazing Grace. And the hero is Ian Griffith, who starred in Fantastic Four. It's a modern version of this movie. And he plays William Wilberforce in England. And anybody who understands history knows that slavery in the British Empire was ended in large, almost certainly by him. And his group was never more than a dozen committed Christians. And Gary said to me, I want you to go watch this movie, and I want you to tell me afterwards, was slavery in the British Empire ended by tens of thousands of people marching in the street, or was it because of a handful of committed people?
Right.
And so this is the message that I want to leave you and your listeners, is that history can be changed by just a handful of people, committed people. Okay. Yeah, we need some. Look, I'd like 10,000 people to move to New Brunswick, but the struggle begins and its success is determined by a relatively small group of people. So never underestimate what a handful of committed people can do. I don't care how many people are at the protest. I don't care. I don't even want to know. Were there people at the protest? All I know, people say, well, how many people will be there? My wife and I will be there.
Yeah.
When we went to Fredericton for our first New Brunswick protest, how many are going to be there? I don't know. My wife and I will be there. We were on the front steps, and then we met 2 people. One of them was John, who is a pod leader, and we doubled our numbers in that one day.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your time today.
No problem. Really appreciate it. Yeah.
And thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Mark, for coming on. And I got to tell you, before I tie this up, I'll just say I'm the same way. If I sat around, 12 years ago when I really started getting active in this and just waited for everyone else till it was popular, I would have still probably been sitting on the sidelines. So thank you for being one of those people who are willing to step out and front.
You too.
Well, thank you.
And you too. I really appreciate what you're doing, and it looks like you're pretty good at it. You look pretty professional, and thank you. Been an honor.
Problem. You have yourself a great day, and thanks to all the people who have joined the stream and joined the chat, and we'll see you in the next one. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.